Oftentimes in the forums, we'll see a question of somebody wondering which is the best way to make an herbal preparation. They want to know, should I try a tincture? Should I take it as a capsule? What about a tea? And so that's what this presentation is going to explore is, which is best? When do we want to use a certain herbal preparation over the other? And we're going to find out the advantages to a certain preparation, the disadvantages, and everything in between. So the ones that we'll particularly be discussing are for internal use. So that is going to include tinctures or alcohol extracts, teas, infusions, decoctions, or water extracts, acetum, vinegar extract, capsules and powders, and then we'll briefly discuss syrups, elixirs, and electuaries as well. So to begin with tinctures or alcohol extracts, there's a couple ways of making tinctures, and one is the folk method. And if you're unfamiliar with making tinctures, I highly suggest the Herbal Basics section on Herb Mentor. It'll give you all the information you need to know, step-by-step process. And so because we're not going to be talking specifically about how to make tinctures, I just want to make reference to the couple different ways of making them so that we can just discuss the advantages and disadvantages of them. So the folk method is basically how most home medicine makers make their tinctures. They might, fill up a jar with fresh plant material, cover that with an alcohol. Oftentimes people use vodka, and then they cover that, let it sit for 6 weeks. Maybe they'll shake it every day, and so that's kind of the basic method. And of course, there's all sorts of variations using dried versus dried versus fresh plant material, using different kinds of alcohol. So a lot of variations, but that's in a nutshell what it is. And so the advantages to making tinctures in the folk method is that it's easy and it's approachable for anyone. Not very difficult, not a lot of measuring going on. You just fill up the jar, cover it with alcohol, and you're good to go. Disadvantages are precisely because there's not a lot of measuring, that there is not a lot of preciseness to the end product. So every batch that you make could be considerably different from the one before. So when trying to figure out dosages and stuff like that, it might vary a lot, and you just don't quite know the exactly what is in the end product because it doesn't have that precise measuring going on. The ratio method is, involving a lot more measuring. You'll see when you buy tinctures at the store, it might say like a 1-to-5 ratio. So they've measured out the herbal material and combined that with a certain amount of alcohol volume, and water as well is involved. So that's just another way of doing it. And the advantages to this is that it has the preciseness that the folk method is lacking. Experienced medicine makers should be able to kind of, within certain parameters, turn out the same quality of end herbal product every time they make something. Of course, there's always going to be variations because all plants are different, but the main point is that there's a preciseness there that's somewhat lacking within the folk method. The disadvantages for the home medicine maker are basically, that it's a lot more difficult in terms of the measuring and weighing and getting that preciseness down. So just looking at those two, that's kind of in a nutshell what they are and the advantages and disadvantages. And in general, we'll just talk about why you might want to use a tincture versus another type of herbal preparation. And one is that it's really fast acting. They say that when you take a tincture, it can be in your bloodstream in as soon as 7 minutes. The alcohol is absorbed through the stomach quite quickly. So 7 minutes is a pretty good time. And so if you're wanting something to act fast, you have pain, or you're trying to get to sleep, or something that you just want immediate response to for more kind of acute situations, for example, that might be a tincture. Easy to digest. Again, everything's kind of extracted from the plant, and so makes it really easy to digest, goes right to the system, and again, that 7-minute rule. Tinctures are potentially very convenient. You can just carry around your little tincture bottle with you, take a couple dropperfuls in water throughout the day, or however you need to be taking it, but definitely pretty convenient. Um, they can be inexpensive, but only really if you make it yourself. If you are buying large amounts of tinctures, that can definitely get pretty pricey. But if you're making all your own, they can definitely be inexpensive. Tinctures don't lose potency. I think Susan Weed is she's herbalist and famous for saying that it'll tinctures will last longer than we will. So not a lot of concern there in terms of shelf life. Tinctures and alcohol are great for extracting alkaloids and resins. So um, one herb that comes to mind is I use a lot of cottonwood buds, which are really thick in resin. So I use a really high alcohol extraction for that, and it actually breaks down the resins into the alcohol. So that can definitely be an advantage. And also, it preserves the fresh plant. So there's some plants that we just really prefer to use fresh. One that comes to mind is chickweed. The dried chickweed material is kind of like dead straw, and chickweed only grows so much out of the year, but we might want to use it all year long. So that's a way to just preserve chickweed for the rest of the year, or other herbs like that. So it definitely keeps the fresh plant kind of alive in a sense. So disadvantages to tinctures. One is alcohol consumption, and some tinctures, depending on the plant, depending on the person, depending on the herbalist even, some tinctures might be given in 3-drop dosages. And in 3 drops there is an absolutely minuscule amount of alcohol, and it's just really not a problem. Even 15, 30 drops 3 times a day. This again is not really a lot of alcohol. There's alcohol in really ripe bananas, other things we eat that it's kind of almost similar to these smaller dosages of tinctures. However, there are some herbs out there that require, maybe an ounce to 3 ounces um, of the dosage per day, and that's really a lot of vodka or whatever the tincture is made out of. That's a lot to be drinking in a day, especially if someone's having sobriety issues. If someone is operating heavy machinery, whatever the case may be, that's just something to take advantage or take into consideration. So again, I just want to put it out there that normally, with smaller dosages, it's not really a huge concern, but could be depending on the circumstance, depending on the person, depending on the plant and the dosage required. Tinctures can certainly be expensive if you're buying them and you're having more of us higher dosage herbs. Then they can certainly be expensive to buy, and they can certainly taste bad too. Just like the motherwort. I was talking about motherwort tincture the other day to somebody, and it's it can be pretty intense for someone who's not used to tasting their medicine. So that's certainly a consideration. So when would we want to use tinctures? When are they best for? One might be the alkaloid or resin extractions, and for we never really want to look at a plant and say, oh, it's high in alkaloids or resins, and that's the only thing that we classify this herb as. But definitely something to keep in mind as you learn your plants. Some herbs are just simply better suited to the tincture extraction. When wanting to preserve fresh herbs, this is a great time we want to use tinctures. This is St. John's wort that's pictured here. That's one, it's really great to use that as a fresh herb, and one that I just really love to use as a tincture in itself. We also talked about chickweed. So there's definitely plants out there that we, may definitely want to use fresh or, prefer to use fresh. So definitely a consideration for that. Also, when we're wanting something to act fast, like acute situations, as I mentioned, wanting to go to sleep, you don't want to take something and then 4 hours later, have it work when you're trying to get to sleep now. So whenever you want fast acting, herbal preparations, tinctures are probably your best bet. So the next section is going to be teas, infusions, decoctions, basically our water extractions. And this is probably the oldest form of making herbs, as opposed probably simply to just eating them, but definitely one of our most basic, simplest ways to make herbs. And I'll just kind of define what we mean by teas, infusions, and decoctions. A tea is generally take like a teaspoon of plant material and you steep it in hot water for maybe 15-20 minutes, and then you strain it off, and then drink the resulting liquid. So that's how I'm going to define what a tea is. An infusion is it's taking a lot bigger amount of plant material. So you might take, for example, an ounce to 2 ounces of plant material, and you're going to infuse it, excuse me, overnight, and or 4 to 8 hours, for example. So it's done for a much longer period of time. And then decoctions are when we take plant materials, especially roots and seeds, barks, these kind of harder plant materials, and we slowly simmer them, usually reducing the liquid by half. And if you're unfamiliar with making any of these, again, the Herbal Basics section on Herb Mentor will give you a great place to start and learn about how to make all of these step by step. So that's teas, infusions, decoctions. And let's talk about the advantages to making teas or infusions. So one great thing is that we're in absolute control of the ingredients. You get the herbal material and you mix it with water. There's no additives, there's nothing extra there. It's just, the plant that has been soaked in water. So that's a great thing in terms of just, purity. And teas and infusions are really great for a high dosage. So if you're looking at the dosage of a plant and it's calling for 15 grams a day, for example, that would be a lot translated into other different preparations. But for a tea, it's relatively doable. So definitely for the high dosage, you might want to think about teas, infusions, decoctions. This can be definitely one of the most inexpensive herbal routes to go. Buying bulk herbs is relatively cheap. You can harvest your own herbs, and then water, is inexpensive as well. So, good way to go in terms of the cost effectiveness. And water extracts vitamins, minerals, and flavonoids really well. To get the vitamins and minerals, you need to do a much longer soaking time. And again, all of that is explained in the Herbal Basics section. But that's kind of where it has the affinity for. So disadvantages. The thing about teas is that you make them, you put this effort into them, and they're going to spoil quickly. It's not like a tincture that's going to stay on the shelf forever. Generally within 1 to 2 days, the tea is going to be unusable, so spoils quickly. And it can be a lot of liquid. If a person doesn't like drinking a lot of liquid, or just having any kind of issues with a lot of liquid, teas might not be a good option because it can certainly be a lot. If you have a bad tasting tea and then you have to drink a lot of it, that can definitely lead to poor compliance. So that's something to take into consideration if there's a plant that tastes really awful and you have to take a lot of it, then the teas might not be the way to go, simply because some people are just unable to do that. Making teas and decoctions can certainly be time consuming, and might be different routine for people to get into. So something that's also to consider as well. So when would we want to use teas? Teas are great for mild acting herbs, like nutritive herbs like nettle. Probably a lot of you have tried nettle nourishing infusion. We're big fans of that at Herb Mentor. So mild acting herbs, nutritive herbs are really great for teas, and nutritive herbs, kind of what we said as well. Anytime you have to take a large quantity of something, teas might be the best way to go. Mild tasting herbs, or even good tasting herbs, are great for teas. They can actually be enjoyable.